Beneath a quiet Chinese field stands a sealed door to the ancient world. This is the unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, guarded for over 2,000 years by his silent Terracotta Army. By the end of this journey, you will understand the chilling clues and incredible theories about what truly lies within that forbidden mound. We will explore ancient descriptions of rivers of liquid mercury and mechanical traps set to kill intruders. We will examine why modern science has peered at the tomb but never opened it, and we will confront the breathtaking possibilities waiting in the dark, from lost libraries to an emperor's preserved body. This is the greatest archaeological mystery on Earth, a puzzle wrapped in layers of earth and time. What would you be willing to risk to finally know the answer? To understand the tomb, you must first understand the man who built it. His name was Qin Shi Huang, and he was not just any king. In the span of a few brutal decades, he conquered 6 warring states and forged them into a single, unified China for the very first time. He gave this new nation its name, its standardized writing, its currency, and its laws. He is the reason China exists as a continuous civilization today. But this towering achievement was driven by a mind consumed by 2 overwhelming forces, power and paranoia. He survived multiple assassination attempts, lived in secret palaces, and traveled in disguised caravans because he trusted no one. This paranoia fueled his most visible legacy, the early fortifications that would one day become the Great Wall, a barrier meant to keep threats out forever. Yet alongside this fear of mortal enemies was a deeper, more personal terror, the terror of death itself. Qin Shi Huang became utterly obsessed with achieving immortality. He dispatched fleets of ships with hundreds of young men and women to mythical eastern islands in search of a legendary elixir of life. He consumed potions made by his court alchemists, potions that likely contained mercury and other poisonous substances, slowly poisoning the very body he sought to preserve. This frantic, lifelong quest created a powerful contradiction within him. On one hand, he desperately sought to avoid death. On the other, he poured unimaginable resources into preparing for it, building a death palace so grand it would serve as his eternal empire. The Terracotta Army was merely the outer garrison. The necropolis was a mirror of his capital city, complete with palaces, stables, and officials, all buried underground. Every decision, every terrifying legend about the tomb's interior flows directly from this one man's psyche, a blend of absolute imperial authority and a profound, childlike fear of the dark. So when we ask what might lie behind that sealed door, we are not guessing at random. We are reading the blueprint of a paranoid emperor's final, desperate command. The emperor's grand design lay hidden and silent for more than 2,000 winters. Then, on a dry March day in 1974, the earth finally spoke. In Linton County, a group of local farmers were simply trying to solve a practical problem, a persistent drought. They needed water, so they began to dig a new well. Their shovels sliced through the dry, compacted soil, going deeper and deeper. Suddenly, one man's tool struck something hard, not rock, but something that gave a strange, hollow thud. As they carefully cleared away the dirt, a shape began to emerge, a human shoulder, then a torso made of fired clay. They had unearthed a life-sized soldier, perfectly preserved, staring blankly up from the darkness. Terrified and believing they had disturbed a buried god or a ghost, the farmers reported their find to the local authorities. Word traveled quickly to archaeologists in the nearby city of Zion. When the first experts arrived, they were utterly bewildered. Nothing in China's long history had prepared them for this. They began a careful excavation, brushing away the soil inch by inch. One warrior became 10, then 100. They found not just soldiers, but horses and bronze chariots, all arranged in precise military formation. The sheer scale of the find was incomprehensible. This was not a single statue but an entire army, buried in parallel trenches as if awaiting orders. The world watched in stunned silence as the news spread. Here was a lost wonder, a masterpiece of ancient art and engineering that had vanished from human memory. Every new pit revealed more complexity: archers, infantry, cavalry, each figure with unique facial features, hairstyles, and armor. The Terracotta Army was a time capsule, a frozen moment of imperial power. But as the global fascination grew, a single, burning question took hold. If this was merely the outer guard, the protectors of the necropolis, what unimaginable treasures lay with the emperor himself, still sealed under the grassy mound less than a mile away? The accidental discovery of the warriors did not solve the central mystery. It made it infinitely deeper and more urgent. The warriors stood in their trenches, a silent perimeter guarding a secret city. This necropolis was not a simple burial chamber. It was a sprawling, underground mirror of the emperor's own capital, Xianyang. Archaeologists have spent decades carefully mapping this city for the dead, and its layout reveals a mind obsessed with eternal order. The famous army, discovered in 1974, occupies 3 main pits to the east, positioned as if to defend the entire complex from spiritual invasion. But they are just one part of the garrison. In other pits, researchers found a breathtaking pair of half-size bronze chariots, complete with horses and drivers, likely meant for the emperor's soul to travel in the afterlife. They uncovered a pit of terracotta acrobats and strongmen, forever frozen in mid-performance, perhaps to provide eternal entertainment. Another held hundreds of stone armor plates, meticulously linked with bronze wire, a ceremonial defense for stone soldiers. There were pits filled with the bones of real horses and the terracotta figures of stable hands, ensuring the emperor's cavalry was always ready. Every discovery reinforced the same staggering concept. This was a fully functional, self-sustaining kingdom buried beneath the soil. Yet all of these wonders, the army, the chariots, the entertainers, they exist in the outer precincts. They are the suburbs, the administrative districts, the defensive walls of this subterranean empire. The geographical and symbolic heart of the entire complex is that unassuming, grassy mound rising from the central plain. Everything points toward it. Every soldier faces outward, away from it, their backs to their master's final resting place. Every road in the necropolis likely leads to it. This mound is the forbidden palace, the inner sanctum, the one place modern science has been almost entirely afraid to touch. We have mapped the outskirts of a ghost city, but its central palace remains a locked box, and everything we have found so far screams that the greatest treasures and the greatest dangers are waiting inside. That central mound is an artificial mountain, a monument to human labor so immense it defies easy comprehension. Picture a pyramid of earth covering an area larger than 70 football fields, rising to the height of a 20-story building. Its base measures roughly 350 meters on each side, and it stands 76 meters tall today, though historians believe it was even larger and more imposing in ancient times before centuries of erosion wore its slopes down. This was not a natural hill chosen for a burial. It was a mountain built from scratch, layer by punishing layer, using a technique called rammed earth. Countless workers would have hauled tons of soil and clay, compacting it into wooden frames with heavy tools, creating dense, hardened strata designed to last for eternity. The result was a geometric, pyramidal form, an impregnable fortress meant to physically and symbolically separate the divine emperor from the world of the living. But the mound itself was only the core of the defense. Archaeologists have identified the remnants of 2 massive rectangular walls that once encircled it, an inner wall and an outer wall, creating a series of consecrated spaces. These walls, now just foundations in the soil, once defined a forbidden city for the dead, with gates and watchtowers controlling access. The space between them was likely filled with ceremonial buildings, temples, and the tombs of high officials, all serving the emperor in the afterlife. So the grassy hill we see today is merely the crumbling shell of a perfect geometric symbol of power. It is the final and greatest barrier, a silent mountain of earth standing guard over whatever lies in the darkness at its heart. The blueprint for this entire mystery was written by a single man, a historian named Sima Qian. Working about a century after the emperor's death, Sima Qian compiled the monumental records of the Grand Historian, a foundational text of Chinese history. Within its pages lies the most detailed and most tantalizing description of the tomb's interior ever recorded. He writes that craftsmen built a miniature universe underground, with the ceiling inlaid with pearls to simulate the stars and constellations. On the floor, they created a model of the empire's lands with its rivers and great mountains, and for the rivers they used flowing mercury, mechanically pumped to circulate endlessly. He describes palaces filled with rare artifacts and treasures beyond counting. But then comes the chilling part. He states that artisans installed automatic crossbows rigged as booby traps to shoot any intruder who dared to break in. And most horrifying of all, he claims that after the emperor's body was placed in the central chamber, the inner passageway was sealed and the outer gate was lowered, trapping all the craftsmen and knowledge workers inside, entombing them alive so the tomb's secrets would die with them. This passage is the single most influential paragraph in archaeology. It is the source of every modern theory about mercury rivers and deadly mechanical defenses. But we must ask a critical question: can we trust it? Sima Qian was a brilliant historian, but he was writing a century after the events, relying on court records and likely popular stories. Was he recording verified fact, imperial propaganda designed to terrify potential tomb robbers, or a collection of folklore that had grown around the legendary site? The truth is probably a mix. The mention of mercury is particularly compelling, not as folklore but as a clue. Modern scientific surveys of the mound have detected unusually high concentrations of mercury in the soil, a fact that gives Sima Qian's account a startling ring of truth. His words are not a perfect map, but they are a flickering lantern held up to a sealed door, casting long, ominous shadows of what might wait within. That single mention of mercury has transformed from ancient myth into a modern scientific detective story. Teams of geologists have taken core samples from the soil in and around the massive burial mound, conducting careful spectroscopic analysis. Their findings are startling and consistent. The mercury concentration in the earth directly above the tomb's suspected location is significantly higher than the natural background levels for the region, in some places up to 100 times the normal amount. This isn't a vague trace, it's a distinct, measurable anomaly concentrated in a specific area, a chemical ghost of something vast and hidden below. This data provides a powerful, tangible link between Sima Qian's 2,000-year-old text and the physical world we can measure today. It suggests his account was not pure invention, but was based on some kernel of truth about the tomb's construction. So why would the builders go to such incredible lengths to pour tons of a toxic, liquid metal into an emperor's grave? Several theories emerge, each revealing a different facet of Qin Shi Huang's obsession. The most poetic is the literal interpretation of Sima Qian's record, that vast channels were constructed to create a miniature, flowing map of China's great rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, with the mercury representing their eternal waters. This would complete the model of the empire he built underground. A more practical theory points to preservation. The ancients knew mercury or quicksilver had unusual properties. It was used in medicines and alchemical potions, and there may have been a belief that its unique nature could slow decay or even aid in spiritual transformation, serving the emperor's quest for immortality. Then there is the most chilling possibility that it was a deliberate and final security measure. Mercury vapor is highly poisonous. A sealed chamber slowly emitting these vapors over centuries would create a deadly atmosphere, a permanent, invisible guard against any thief who managed to bypass the mechanical traps. It could be all three, a symbolic landscape, a preservative, and a lethal deterrent combined. This scientific clue forces us to ask a new and unsettling question. If rivers of mercury were indeed installed and have been sitting undisturbed for 2,200 years, what has that environment done to the tomb's interior? The constant, slow evaporation and condensation of the metal could have created a surreal, silvered world. Artifacts might be coated in a fine mercury film. Organic materials like silks, wooden sculptures, or even the emperor's remains could be preserved in strange ways or utterly decomposed by the toxicity. The chambers themselves might be hazardous vaults where the very air is a historical poison. The soil tests tell us something is there, confirming the legend is real, but they also warn us that opening the tomb might not reveal a pristine treasure chamber. It might unleash a toxic, ancient world frozen in a shimmering, deadly mist. The legend of the mechanized crossbows is perhaps the most cinematic detail of all. Sima Qian wrote of mechanisms that would automatically release, shooting any unauthorized person who dared to enter the sacred chambers. It is a perfect, terrifying security system for an emperor who trusted no one, even in death. But was such a feat of ancient engineering actually possible? To answer that, we must look at what the Qin dynasty was truly capable of. This was the era that gave us the Terracotta Army itself, with its thousands of unique, lifelike faces. More tellingly, it was a period of astonishing technological standardization. The real, bronze-tipped crossbow bolts carried by the clay soldiers were mass-produced with interchangeable parts, a concept Europe would not rediscover for over 1,000 years. Qin craftsmen were masters of bronze, creating incredibly intricate mechanisms like the chain drives and umbrella mounts on the emperor's buried bronze chariots. The knowledge to create a mechanical trigger system, perhaps using tripwires or pressure plates linked to torsion-powered crossbows, certainly existed. The real question is not could they build it, but could it last? Could a system of wood, sinew, and bronze, no matter how brilliantly engineered, remain cocked and ready in a damp, sealed environment for 22 centuries? Most engineers are skeptical. The organic components, the wood of the bows and the cords, would have long since rotted or petrified, leaving only corroded metal parts scattered on the floor. Yet the fear persists, and it has evolved. For modern archaeologists, the primary concern is no longer a hail of ancient arrows. It is the integrity of the tomb itself. The first breath of outside air, with its modern humidity and pollutants, could be catastrophic. Vibrations from excavation could disturb delicate, precariously balanced structures, causing a sudden ceiling collapse. There is the ever-present threat of built-up toxic gases beyond just mercury vapor, like methane or carbon dioxide, that could silently flood a newly opened chamber. And then there is the most heartbreaking risk of all, the instant decay of priceless artifacts. Imagine a perfectly preserved silk banner, its colors vibrant after millennia in a stable, sealed environment. The moment oxygen touches it, it could darken, crumble, and turn to dust before our eyes. The booby traps we fear today are not mechanical, but chemical and physical, a race against time we may not be equipped to win. The mercury and the booby traps are not the only guardians of Qin Shi Huang's tomb. The most powerful protector of all is our own restraint. For decades, the world's leading archaeologists and the Chinese government have stared at that grassy mound and made a conscious, deliberate choice to leave it sealed. This is not a mystery born of a lack of curiosity, but a profound respect for the limits of our own technology and the weight of our responsibility. The decision to wait is a complex puzzle of science, ethics, and philosophy. The most immediate and sobering reason comes from a heartbreaking lesson learned just feet away from the emperor's mound with his own Terracotta Army. When the first warriors were pulled from their protective soil in the 1970s, they were not the plain, gray clay figures we see in museums today. They were breathtakingly lifelike, painted in vibrant pigments of red, green, purple, and gold. Their faces had pink skin tones, their armor was detailed with colorful lacquer. They were a polychrome masterpiece, and then, within minutes of exposure to the dry air of the outside world, the ancient paint, bonded to the clay with a delicate egg-based binder, began to curl, flake, and vanish forever. Modern conservators now use advanced chemical sprays to stabilize any remaining pigment immediately upon discovery, but the initial loss was irreversible. It was a global wake-up call. If we could not preserve the paint on a fired clay soldier, what catastrophic damage would we inflict on the far more delicate treasures inside the central tomb? Imagine silk manuscripts, lacquered furniture, wooden sculptures, or even organic remains. The moment that 2,000-year-old equilibrium of humidity and gases is broken, a clock starts ticking, a clock we may not be able to stop. Beyond the technical challenge lies the staggering scale and cost. Excavating the mound would not be a simple dig. It would be one of the largest, most complex, and most expensive archaeological projects in human history, likely spanning generations and costing billions. It would require building a permanent, climate-controlled structure over the entire site before a single scoop of earth is removed. A structure akin to a massive aircraft hangar with laboratory-grade atmospheric controls. The manpower, the decades of meticulous work, the endless conservation, it is a generational commitment that no nation undertakes lightly. Then there is the profound ethical question, should we? In China, there is a deep cultural reverence for ancestors and the sanctity of burial sites. Disturbing a tomb, especially one of such monumental significance, is not a decision made lightly. The Chinese government's official policy reflects this. It is called protective excavation. This means they prioritize non-invasive surveying and only excavate sites that are in immediate danger from natural erosion, construction, or looters. The Emperor's Mound, solid and guarded, is in no such danger. It is safer right where it is, sleeping under its mountain of earth. So we are left with a timeless dilemma, a choice between the burning desire for knowledge and the solemn duty of preservation. Do we open the door to satisfy our curiosity, knowing we might destroy the very things we seek to understand? Or do we accept that some mysteries are meant to stay buried, allowing the past to keep its secrets in order to preserve them for a future that might be better equipped to receive them? Our choice to wait does not mean we are blind. Science has given us eyes that can see through the earth, allowing us to map the shadows of the buried palace without ever lifting a shovel. This is the realm of non-invasive archaeology, a silent investigation using tools like ground-penetrating radar, magnetic surveys, and resistivity mapping. Think of it like a medical scan for the planet. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy into the soil and listens for the echoes, building a three-dimensional image of density changes below. Magnetic surveys detect subtle disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried structures, like fired clay or metal objects. Resistivity mapping measures how easily electrical currents pass through the ground, revealing where moisture is trapped or where solid, man-made walls might block the flow. For decades, teams have carefully moved these instruments back and forth over the Emperor's Mound, compiling a ghostly outline of what rests beneath. The data paints a compelling, yet frustratingly vague picture. It suggests a vast, rammed earth pyramid at the core, surrounded by an intricate network of walls and passageways. There appear to be several large chambers and corridors, possibly even a central room of staggering size, fitting for an emperor's eternal throne. The scans also show significant anomalies, areas where the readings are completely off the charts. One such anomaly, a patch of extraordinarily high conductivity, aligns perfectly with the area where soil tests revealed elevated mercury. This is our strongest scientific hint that Sima Qian's account of flowing mercury rivers might be more than a legend, it might be a measurable fact. Yet for all their power, these technologies only show us outlines and blurs. They can tell us there is a large, rectangular void, but not whether it contains a bronze chariot or a mountain of jade. They can detect a metallic anomaly, but not whether it's a pool of quicksilver or a collection of bronze ritual vessels. They reveal the skeleton of the tomb, the architectural bones, but none of the flesh, color, or life that might still cling to them. So we are left with a paradox. We have more data about this sealed tomb than any other in history, yet we know less about its true contents. Every shadow on the radar screen deepens the mystery, inviting 100 new questions for every one it tentatively answers. The ghostly outlines on our radar screens leave a cavernous space for the imagination. So let us step through that sealed door in our minds and ask the first and most obvious question. What material treasures might the first emperor have taken with him into eternity? To find clues, we look not at his own untouched tomb, but at the burials of those who came after him, nobles and kings of the later Han dynasty. Their tombs, though looted over centuries, still yielded wonders that take the breath away. Most famous are the jade burial suits, crafted from thousands of small plaques of precious nephrite jade, meticulously threaded together with gold or silver wire. The belief was that jade preserved the body from decay. For an emperor obsessed with immortality, a full jade suit is not just a possibility, it is a near certainty, perhaps the most magnificent one ever created. But the treasures would extend far beyond the emperor's own body. Think of the ritual bronze vessels. The Qin were masters of bronze casting, as shown by the exquisite chariots found near the army. Inside the central chamber, we could expect a forest of monumental tripods and cauldrons, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns and inscriptions, possibly detailing the emperor's achievements or spells for the afterlife. Then there is gold and silver, not just as coin, but worked into stunning artistry. Plates, cups, ornaments, and statues, all speaking of unlimited imperial wealth. Precious stones like turquoise, amber, and jet might be inlaid into furniture or weapons. And silk, the fabric of emperors, could there be entire bolts of it, woven with patterns now lost to time, or magnificent tapestries depicting the emperor's unification of China? But among all this, one set of objects would hold power beyond mere beauty, the symbols of his authority, his actual crown, likely made of gold and jade. His scepter, the symbol of his command, and most significant of all, his imperial seal. Ancient texts say this seal was carved from the legendary Heshebite jade and was inscribed with the phrase, having received the mandate from heaven, may the emperor lead a long and prosperous life. This was not just a stamp, it was the physical embodiment of the emperor's divine right to rule, the very soul of the state. To find it would be to hold the heart of ancient China in your hand. Yet for all this staggering potential wealth, it may not be the most valuable thing hidden in the dark. But a jade suit and golden treasures are objects, things. The ultimate mystery waiting in the central chamber is not a thing at all, but a person. What happened to the body of Qin Shi Huang? After 2,200 years, what final form does the first emperor take? The possibilities range from the scientifically profound to the eerily unsettling. The most likely scenario, based on other noble burials of the time, is that we would find a skeleton, perhaps still clad in that magnificent jade suit. The bones themselves would be a historical treasure trove. Modern forensic anthropology could read them like a book. We could learn his precise height, his build, whether he suffered from old injuries or chronic ailments like arthritis. Analysis of his teeth and bones might reveal his diet, even traces of the mercury-laden elixirs he drank in his quest for immortality. But what if the environment of the tomb defied the normal process of decay? Sima Qian's account of flowing mercury is not just a security feature, it is a potential preservative. Mercury is a potent antibacterial agent. In a sealed, mercury-rich atmosphere, the conditions for bacterial growth that cause decomposition could have been severely slowed or even halted. We are not talking about a perfectly preserved body like a bog person or an ice mummy, but perhaps something in between, a form of partial preservation that would be utterly unique in the archaeological record. The emperor's remains might be desiccated, darkened, and shrunken, yet still retaining soft tissue, hair, or even the remnants of his imperial robes. The thought is staggering, to potentially look upon the actual face of the man who unified China. Then there is a darker, more destructive possibility. Another ancient historian, writing centuries later, claimed that during the rebellions that broke out after the emperor's death, tomb raiders broke in, looted the treasures, and set a fire so great it melted the emperor's bronze coffin. If this fragment of story holds any truth, the central chamber might hold only ashes and melted metal, a scene of ancient desecration. This is the great gamble at the heart of the mystery. Which version of history does the sealed mound protect? An emperor enshrined or an emperor destroyed? Opening the tomb would finally answer this, but it would also present an unprecedented opportunity, the chance to recover the emperor's DNA. This genetic blueprint, locked away in darkness, could answer questions that have puzzled historians for millennia. It could confirm or refute long-standing debates about his lineage and health. It might reveal genetic predispositions to diseases that could explain his paranoia or his sudden death during a tour of the empire at the age of 49. Some have even speculated, though it ventures into sensitive territory, that his DNA could be compared to modern populations, tracing the living legacy of the first emperor in people today. Yet this power comes with profound responsibility. Extracting and analyzing such ancient genetic material is incredibly difficult and fraught with ethical questions about disturbing the dead for knowledge. Would studying the emperor's DNA be the ultimate historical revelation, or a step too far into a realm he sought to make sacred and eternal? The answer lies in the dark, with the emperor himself waiting in a silence we have chosen for now not to break. The emperor's quest for immortality may have been matched by his obsession with controlling history itself. This leads us to one of the most tantalizing possibilities of all, the potential for a library of lost knowledge sealed within the tomb. To understand why this is not just a hopeful guess, we must revisit one of the darkest acts of Qin Shi Huang's reign. In his drive to unify thought and crush dissent, the emperor ordered a massive book burning. He commanded that all historical records from rival states be destroyed, along with texts on philosophy, particularly Confucian classics that challenged his legalist doctrine. Only technical manuals on agriculture, medicine, and divination were to be spared. The old stories say he went further, executing hundreds of scholars by burying them alive, ensuring the carriers of this forbidden knowledge were silenced forever. It was an attempt to erase the past and control the narrative of the future. But what if, in a stunning act of contradiction, the emperor also preserved it? What if the greatest library of the age was not destroyed but hidden? It is a compelling theory. An emperor who built a perfect model of his empire for the afterlife would surely want the administrative and philosophical texts to govern it. He would need the star charts for his pearl-studded ceiling, the medical texts for his health, the legal codes to maintain order. Could the central chamber or a side annex contain vaults of intact bamboo scrolls? These would not be the charred fragments we have today, but complete works. We might finally read the suppressed histories of the conquered states in their own words. We could discover lost philosophical debates, advanced astronomical observations, or detailed maps of a world the Qin knew. The discovery would be a seismic event for historians, shattering and rewriting our understanding of ancient China's intellectual landscape in a single moment. It would be like finding the Library of Alexandria perfectly preserved, yet this hope is shadowed by a cruel reality. Bamboo and silk, the writing materials of the time, are among the most fragile treasures. Even in a sealed tomb, 2 millennia of subtle humidity shifts, microbial activity, or the very mercury vapor we suspect is present, could have turned them to unreadable pulp. The library may be there, but it might exist only as a dark stain in the earth, a ghost of words that can never be read. A tomb is more than a burial, it is a statement of belief. If the outer chambers held the necessities of an earthly empire, the inner sanctum was likely designed for a celestial one. The ancient texts speak of a ceiling inlaid with pearls to represent the stars and constellations, a glittering map of the heavens frozen in time. Imagine standing in that central chamber, looking up not at stone, but at the night sky as the Qin dynasty knew it. Each pearl would mark a significant star, perhaps arranged into the forms of the azure dragon, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, and the black tortoise, the four celestial symbols that guarded the cardinal directions. On the floor below, the model of the empire's rivers and mountains, possibly marked with flowing mercury, would mirror this cosmic order. This was not merely decoration, it was a functional diagram, a ritual machine built for the emperor's soul. In the Qin worldview, the emperor was not just a political ruler, he was the son of heaven, the vital link between the human realm and the divine cosmos. His mandate came from the stars, and in death, he was expected to return to that celestial bureaucracy, to take up a position of authority among the gods. The tomb, therefore, was a launch pad and a control center. Its precise alignment, its symbolic geography, every detail was likely calculated to facilitate his journey and secure his status. The flowing mercury rivers could represent the Milky Way, the celestial river that divided the heavens. The entire structure might be oriented to specific astronomical events, like the rising of a particular star on the day of his death or coronation. This transforms our understanding of the space from a treasure vault into a sacred instrument. The silence within is not empty, it is charged with intention, a frozen moment of ritual awaiting a completion that never came. What rituals were meant to be performed there? Were their mechanisms, now stilled, designed to simulate the movement of the stars? The tomb's greatest secret may not be what it contains, but what it was meant to do, a final, grand alchemy to turn a mortal man into an eternal cosmic king. The Terracotta Army reveals a pattern of substitution, replacing the living with the eternal clay. This principle could extend far beyond the military garrison into the very heart of the emperor's daily life. Buried in other pits, we have already found a glimpse of this world with terracotta entertainers and stable hands. It is logical, then, to suspect that the necropolis contained a complete terracotta court. Picture silent halls filled not with soldiers but with civil officials, each figure's face etched with the calm demeanor of a bureaucrat, their hands perhaps holding bamboo slips detailing the eternal administration of the afterlife. There could be rows of scribes forever ready to record the emperor's divine decrees. We might find the emperor's closest advisors, their postures suggesting deference or counsel. And then, perhaps most hauntingly, a chamber of terracotta concubines, a silent assembly of figures representing the imperial harem, frozen in postures of grace and attendance. The palaces and government bureaus themselves might not be mere empty buildings. They could be populated. A terracotta chef stands in a kitchen pit beside clay stoves. A terracotta gardener tends to a field of bronze or jade plants. Even the animals would be represented beyond the horses, with clay dogs, birds, and exotic creatures from across the empire, all part of this perfectly ordered, motionless ecosystem. Yet clay was not the only medium for this grand illusion. Wood, though less durable, was used for exquisite figurines in other noble tombs. Lifelike wooden servants painted in fading pigments could be standing in attendance holding lamps or fans. The walls of buried chambers might have been hung with vast silk banners, painted with scenes of celestial journeys or portraits of mythic ancestors, their colors preserved in the dark. And what of sound? An emperor's court required music for ritual and pleasure. It is entirely plausible that a pit holds an eternal orchestra, with terracotta musicians holding real, perfectly crafted bronze bells, stone chimes, and wooden stringed instruments like the sea, all tuned and ready for a symphony that will never be played. This expands the mystery from what treasures are hidden to what kind of world was suspended. Was it a silent clay monument or a richly textured replica filled with the ghosts of texture, color, and even potential sound, all waiting in the stillness for a command that never comes? The silent court of clay figures stands as a testament to a chilling imperial logic where human life was a currency to be spent. The wonder of the Terracotta Army is shadowed by a much grimmer archaeological reality found throughout the necropolis, the evidence of mass human sacrifice. In separate burial pits surrounding the emperor's mound, archaeologists have uncovered something far more disturbing than statues. They have found mass graves containing the real skeletal remains of people, not soldiers, but young women and palace workers. One pit held the bones of over 100 individuals, many identified as women likely from the emperor's own harem. Another contained the skeletons of laborers, their bodies thrown into communal pits with little ceremony. These were not natural deaths, they were sacrificial offerings meant to accompany the emperor into the next world to continue serving him. This practice, while brutal to modern sensibilities, was an established tradition among the nobility of the time, a final, terrifying assertion of ownership over human beings. But it is Sima Qian's specific claim that casts the longest shadow, the suggestion that after the emperor's coffin was sealed in the central chamber, the inner gate was shut, trapping all the master craftsmen and engineers inside, entombing them alive to protect the tomb's secrets forever. Was this a final, paranoid act to ensure no one could reveal the mechanisms of the traps or the layout of the treasure chambers? Historians debate the literal truth of this single event, but the underlying reality is clear. The workers who built this wonder lived under a regime of absolute lethal control. They were conscripts, prisoners of war, and convicts, millions of them, who labored for decades under brutal conditions. Ancient records state that so many died during the construction that their bodies were simply thrown into the fill of the walls, becoming part of the mound itself. Whether they were sealed in a final, dramatic act or simply worked to death and discarded, their fate is woven into the earth of the site. This sobering layer forces us to hold two truths at once. We can marvel at the artistic and engineering genius the tomb represents, while also recognizing it as a monument to profound human suffering, built on a foundation of fear and expendable lives. The silent army guards not just an emperor's treasure, but the echoes of their own creator's final, unanswered cries. His frantic search for an earthly elixir casts the tomb in a new and startling light. For decades, Qin Shi Huang funded a sprawling network of alchemists and sorcerers, men who promised him the secret to eternal life. He consumed their concoctions, potions likely laced with mercury, jade dust, and other toxic substances, ironically poisoning himself in the process. He even sent a massive expedition eastward, led by a man named Zhu Fu, with hundreds of young boys and girls, to find the mythical Pinglai Mountain and its immortal sages. They never returned, but what if his final, grand project was not a surrender to death, but the last and most elaborate experiment of his immortality quest? The sealed tomb might be far more than a burial chamber. It could be the ultimate alchemical laboratory, a controlled environment designed to achieve in death what he could not in life. Think of the mercury rivers. To his court scientists, mercury was not just a metal, it was a magical substance, quicksilver, believed to hold transformative properties. Placing it at the heart of his tomb could have been a deliberate ritual act, an attempt to catalyze a spiritual transformation or preserve his physical form in a state of suspended animation. Beyond the mercury, what other alchemical treasures might fill the chambers? We could find meticulously organized collections of rare minerals, cinnabar, orpiment, realgar, each stored in jade containers. There might be elaborate distillation apparatus made of bronze, designed to refine essences. Most tantalizing of all, the tomb could contain the very recipes he sought, inscribed on bamboo slips or silk scrolls. These would not be simple lists, but complex formulas detailing processes to purify the soul and body, to unite with the Tao, the fundamental force of the universe. The presence of such a library would revolutionize our understanding of early Chinese science and mysticism, blurring the line between tomb and temple, between burial and ritual ascent. This transforms the central mystery from what he took with him to what he was trying to become. The entire necropolis, with its model of the empire and the cosmos, might be seen as a giant alchemical crucible. The earth mound is the vessel, the mercury is the catalyst, the emperor's body is the primary ingredient, and the intended reaction was nothing less than the transmutation of a mortal man into an immortal celestial emperor. His tomb, then, is not a grave. It is a machine built for transcendence, frozen mid-process, waiting through the centuries for a reaction that may still be quietly, mysteriously unfolding in the dark. The silent alchemical machine of Qin Shi Huang's tomb stands alone in its mystery, but it is not the only imperial resting place China has ever built. To sharpen our speculation about what might lie within his mound, we can look at the emperors who came after him, whose tombs have been opened. These sites provide our best real-world clues, a series of tantalizing glimpses into the burial customs of ancient Chinese rulers. Perhaps the most directly relevant comparison comes from the Han Dynasty, which rose to power just a few years after the Qin collapsed. The rulers of the Han consciously modeled their state on the Qin, but sought to correct its brutal excesses. Their tombs, however, still followed a grand tradition. The most stunning example is not an emperor's but a noblewoman's. In the early 1970s, archaeologists in Hunan province opened the Mawangdui tombs dating from the early Han period. Inside the airtight, charcoal-sealed tomb of a woman named Xin Zhui, they found a miracle of preservation. Her body was so perfectly intact after 2,100 years that her skin was still soft, her joints flexible, and her internal organs recognizable. She lay surrounded by a breathtaking array of treasures, lacquerware, silk garments, and most importantly, a library of silk scrolls containing lost texts on medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. This single tomb proved that the technology for near-perfect preservation existed in China at a time very close to Qin Shi Huang's death. If a noblewoman could be preserved with such care, what unimaginable measures would the first emperor have commanded for himself? Centuries later, the Ming Dynasty offers another point of reference. In the 1950s, archaeologists made the deliberate decision to excavate the Dingling tomb, the burial place of the Wanli emperor who ruled in the 16th century. They found a vast underground palace built of stone, filled with priceless artifacts, silk robes, and jade. Most crucially, they found the emperor's skeleton, along with the remains of his two empresses. While the organic materials had decayed significantly in the damp environment, the grandeur and scale of the burial were clear. The Ming tombs show a continuous thread of imperial ambition, the desire to recreate a palace underground. Yet they also delivered a sobering lesson. Upon exposure to air, the magnificent silks and wooden objects from Dingling rapidly deteriorated, despite the team's best efforts at the time. The excavation is now often cited as a cautionary tale, a primary reason for China's current policy of leaving major tombs untouched. Then there is the stark opposite example, the fate of the glorious Tang Dynasty emperors. Their massive tumuli, great earth pyramids dotting the landscape near Zion, are almost universally empty. Looted over the centuries, sometimes just decades after burial, these tombs stand as hollow monuments. They remind us that the greatest threat to a tomb is not time but human greed. The fact that Qin Shi Huang's central mound shows no evidence of a major, ancient breach is nothing short of a historical miracle. It suggests his defenses, whether physical traps, toxic mercury, the sheer scale of the mound, or simply the power of his terrifying legend, actually worked. They kept the looters at bay for over 2 millennia. These comparisons create a powerful framework for our speculation. From Mawangdui, we learn that exquisite preservation of bodies and fragile texts was possible. From the Ming, we understand the scale of an imperial underground palace and the very real risks of opening it. From the looted Tang tombs, we feel the preciousness of the Qin mound's intact state. Together, they tell us that the potential contents of the first emperor's tomb likely combine the organic wonders of Mawangdui with the monumental grandeur of the Ming, all on a scale dwarfing either. He was the originator, the man who set the standard. His tomb would not be a copy, it would be the unparalleled prototype, the first and most ambitious attempt to conquer death itself. Every discovery in another tomb feels like finding a single piece of a scattered manuscript, while the complete, original volume remains locked away just out of reach. That intact state places the tomb at the center of a global conversation, a debate that extends far beyond China's borders. For archaeologists and historians around the world, Qin Shi Huang's sealed mound represents the ultimate unanswered question, a siren call that challenges the very purpose of their field. There is a broad, international consensus on the tomb's likely contents, built from decades of non-invasive scans and comparative studies. Most experts agree the central chamber will contain a breathtaking array of artifacts, from a jade burial suit and ritual bronzes to potential libraries of bamboo slips. They largely accept the scientific data pointing to high mercury levels, and many believe the environment inside could have led to some form of remarkable, if bizarre, preservation. Yet, this consensus shatters when the discussion turns to action, to the pivotal question of whether we should ever open it. Here, the global community divides into distinct, passionate camps. One camp, often led by researchers in Europe and America, argues for a carefully planned, technologically assisted excavation in the near future. Their reasoning is driven by a profound faith in modern science. They point to advances in robotics, microclimate control, and non-destructive scanning that were unimaginable even 20 years ago. They envision sending tiny, agile robots through drilled boreholes to map the interior in extreme detail before any human enters. They talk of building a vast, hermetic dome over the entire mound, a climate-controlled bubble where excavation could proceed in a laboratory-perfect environment. For them, the risk of waiting is greater than the risk of acting. They worry about unforeseen natural disasters, seismic shifts, or even the slow, creeping damage of groundwater that could destroy the tomb's contents before we ever see them. The potential knowledge to be gained, they argue, is a legacy for all humanity, and it is our duty to retrieve it with every tool at our disposal. The opposing view, which finds strong support among many Chinese scholars and cultural officials, emphasizes patience and reverence. This perspective sees the tomb not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a sacred trust to be guarded. The caution born from the Terracotta Army's fading paint is a lived trauma here, a reminder of irreversible loss. There is a palpable fear that our technology, for all its sophistication, is still a blunt instrument against the delicate equilibrium of a 2,000-year-old microclimate. This camp advocates for a patient, century-long approach, continuously improving non-invasive scanning methods until the day we can be virtually certain of preserving every thread of silk, every flake of pigment. Underpinning this technical debate is a deeper cultural tension. For many international scientists, the tomb is a site of world heritage, a keystone in human history whose secrets belong to the collective story of our species. The desire to know is a universal human impulse, yet within China, the tomb is first and foremost a national and ancestral monument. It is the resting place of the founder of the Chinese state, a figure of immense cultural and almost mythic significance. The decision to disturb such a site is not merely a scientific or bureaucratic one, it is laden with philosophical and spiritual weight. This creates a fascinating dynamic where global curiosity meets local custodianship. The world watches, hypothesizes, and yearns for a glimpse, while the primary stewards of the site weigh that desire against a profound responsibility to their own history and to the integrity of the tomb itself. The unopened mound, therefore, has become more than an archaeological site. It is a living test case for a fundamental question: who does the past truly belong to, and who gets to decide when its silence should finally be broken. The debate over opening the tomb hinges on a single word: risk. But what if technology could one day eliminate that risk entirely? We stand on the edge of a new frontier where the tools of archaeology are beginning to look less like shovels and brushes and more like something from a science fiction novel. The mission to explore Qin Shi Huang's inner sanctum without destroying it would be the most delicate operation in human history. It would start not with a groundbreaking ceremony but with a whisper. The first phase would involve deploying swarms of ultra-thin, agile robotic probes. These would not be the bulky rovers we send to Mars, but devices perhaps no larger than a dragonfly, equipped with micro-cameras and environmental sensors. They would enter through boreholes no wider than a pencil, drilled with pinpoint precision into predetermined, non-critical areas of the mound. Their goal: to map the void in extreme detail, to taste the air, and to see what no human eye has seen for 22 centuries. They would float through the darkness, their lights illuminating the chamber inch by inch, building a perfect three-dimensional model of every artifact, every wall, every pool of shimmering liquid. This data would be the blueprint for the next audacious step: the construction of a permanent climate-controlled chamber around the entire tomb. Think of it as building a cathedral over the mound, a sealed, sterile environment where temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition are controlled with absolute precision. Before a single clod of earth is removed from the entrance, this structure would be completed, its own atmosphere matching the tomb's internal conditions. Only then would archaeologists working from within this protective bubble begin the painstaking process of entry. The real-time stabilization of the environment would be a constant dance. As a section of a wall is exposed, localized climate systems would immediately bathe it in the exact mix of gases needed to prevent decay. Advanced three-dimensional scanners operating at a near-molecular level could analyze the chemical composition of a silk banner or a lacquer box the instant it is revealed, allowing conservators to formulate a custom preservation treatment on the spot. This is not mere speculation. Elements of this technology already exist in high-end museum labs and semiconductor clean rooms. The challenge is scaling it to encompass an entire pyramid. The mission would be a global endeavor, merging robotics, materials science, chemistry, and history into one unified purpose. It transforms the act of excavation from a race against decay into a controlled, reverent unveiling. The tomb would not be ransacked, it would be gently awakened, its secrets studied in the very environment that preserved them. This technological dream asks us to reframe the entire dilemma. The question is no longer if we should open the tomb, but when our tools become gentle enough to be worthy of the task. The technological dream of a perfect excavation forces a deeper question of ethics. Is the pursuit of knowledge, no matter how careful, an inherent violation? This is not a simple choice between action and inaction, but a profound ethical debate with passionate voices on both sides. The argument for excavation is built on urgency and opportunity. Proponents ask, what if the tomb is not as stable as we think? Seismic activity, shifting groundwater, or even slow chemical reactions could be degrading its contents right now. By waiting, we might be allowing history to crumble into dust unseen. Every day we delay is a day closer to a potential natural disaster or a future where looting technology might finally breach its defenses. The knowledge locked inside is not just for China, but for all humanity. It could rewrite chapters of ancient history, reveal lost philosophies, and show us the true face of a pivotal civilization. To have the capability to learn and choose not to, they argue, is a form of intellectual abandonment. Our curiosity is not a flaw, it is the engine of human progress, and this is the ultimate historical frontier. Yet the argument against excavation carries its own powerful weight. It speaks of patience and profound respect. This view holds that the tomb's greatest protection has been its silence. Opening it, even with the most advanced technology, is an irreversible act. We get only one chance, and if we are wrong, if a single parameter is off, we become the agents of the destruction we sought to prevent. The fading paint on the warriors is a permanent warning. Beyond the physical risk is a philosophical one concerning the sanctity of the dead. Qin Shi Huang designed his tomb as an eternal resting place, a sacred space. Do we, as a modern society, have the right to disturb that for our own curiosity, even if we call it scholarship? There is also the principle of intergenerational equity. Perhaps we are not the best custodians of this treasure. By leaving it sealed, we preserve the choice for future generations who may possess technologies we cannot yet conceive, methods that would allow them to explore without intrusion, to read a closed scroll without unrolling it. To open the tomb now might be seen as a selfish act, prioritizing our desire to know over the right of the future to discover it intact. So the mound remains a silent arbiter in this timeless debate. It forces us to weigh the value of potential knowledge against the value of guaranteed preservation. Is the possible reward worth the undeniable risk? The answer depends on what we value more, the story we might learn, or the mystery we would certainly lose. The tomb holds its secrets not just behind walls of earth, but within this very human dilemma. What would you choose? The ethical debate is grounded in science, but the human imagination requires no such permission. Where history leaves gaps, folklore and conspiracy theories rush in to fill the void, painting the unopened tomb with colors far stranger than any archaeologist's brush. The sheer magnitude of the mystery has birthed a modern mythology all its own. Online forums and sensational documentaries whisper of possibilities that leap from the pages of science fiction. Some suggest the tomb is not a burial chamber at all, but a sealed gateway or a stargate, a dimensional portal left by advanced ancient beings or even extraterrestrial visitors who helped shape early Chinese civilization. In these tales, the mercury rivers are not symbolic, but the coolant or fuel for a dormant machine of unimaginable power. Others speculate that the tomb holds the blueprints to a lost super technology, perhaps a form of clean energy or anti-gravity, knowledge so dangerous it was deliberately buried with the emperor. There are even darker whispers that Qin Shi Huang discovered the true secret to immortality deep underground, and that he is not dead, but in a state of suspended animation, waiting for a future time to awaken and reclaim his empire. These stories are, of course, creative fiction. They have no basis in the archaeological record or the historical texts, yet they are incredibly revealing. They show us that the tomb has transcended its physical form to become a blank canvas for our deepest curiosities and anxieties. It represents the ultimate locked door, and humanity has never been good at leaving a locked door alone without wondering what fantastical thing might lie behind it. The wild theories, while not real, serve a real purpose. They highlight the raw, magnetic power of the unknown. They prove that the tomb's greatest treasure may not be gold or jade, but its limitless capacity to make us dream, to wonder, and to question the very boundaries of our past. In a world that often feels fully mapped and explained, the silent mound in Shaanxi is a rare and precious reminder that some stories are still waiting in the dark, daring us to imagine their endings. The silent mound does more than guard history, it shapes the present. Today, the site is a vast, open-air museum complex, a pilgrimage destination for millions. Visitors from across the globe walk the long, covered halls above the Terracotta Army pits, gazing down at the silent ranks. They wander through exhibition buildings showcasing the bronze chariots and stone armor. The experience is carefully curated, a journey through the outer wonders of the necropolis that always, inevitably, leads the eye toward that central, grassy hill in the distance. It is a physical reminder that the story is not finished. The site was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987, recognized as a masterpiece of human creative genius and a unique testimony to a vanished civilization. This global designation frames the tomb not just as a Chinese treasure, but as a legacy belonging to all of humanity. Yet its meaning within China itself runs even deeper. For the Chinese people, the first emperor is a foundational, if controversial, figure. He is the unifier, the lawgiver, the architect of the Chinese state. His tomb and the mighty army that guards it are profound symbols of national endurance and cultural continuity. They are a tangible link to a glorious, ancient past that stretches back over 2,000 years, a source of immense pride and identity. This transforms the mystery from an archaeological puzzle into a living cultural asset. The fact that the central tomb remains sealed is crucial to its power. An open tomb with all its treasures catalogued and displayed would become a static museum piece, its questions answered, but a sealed tomb is dynamic. It is a conversation with the past that never ends. It invites every visitor to participate in the wonder, to stand before that quiet earth and ask their own questions. What would you hope to find inside? What are you afraid might be lost if the door is opened? The unknown is a powerful draw, more compelling than any single artifact could ever be. It guarantees that the site is never truly completed, that its story is always being written in the imagination of each new generation. The unopened tomb teaches a subtle lesson about history itself, that sometimes the most powerful legacy is not what we know, but what we respectfully choose not to disturb. The future of that grassy mound is not written in stone, but in policy and patience. Chinese cultural authorities have been unequivocal in their public stance for decades. The central tomb of Qin Shi Huang will remain sealed for the foreseeable future. Their official position is one of protection, not prohibition. The state administration of cultural heritage consistently emphasizes a principle known as rescue archaeology, prioritizing excavations only when a site is under immediate threat from natural disaster, urban development, or looting. Since the Emperor's Mound shows no signs of such imminent danger, it is granted the highest level of protection, a permanent reprieve from the trowel and brush. This is not an indefinite postponement born of fear, but a deliberate, strategic waiting game. The stated goal is to allow science to advance to a point where any future excavation would be virtually risk-free, a standard no current technology can yet meet. However, within this broad policy of preservation, a more nuanced possibility is emerging. While the heart of the tomb remains inviolate, archaeologists have openly discussed the potential for limited, targeted investigations of the necropolis's outermost structures. Imagine a scenario where, using the most advanced micro-drilling and robotic probes, researchers select a small, non-critical annex, perhaps a storage pit or a minor ceremonial building located well away from the central chamber. The goal would not be to find treasure, but to gather data. They could extract minute air samples to analyze the 2,000-year-old atmosphere, retrieve tiny fragments of materials to understand decay processes, and finally get a physical baseline for the environmental conditions within the complex. Such a mission would be the archaeological equivalent of sending a scout ahead of the main army, a way to test our preservation technologies in the real, ancient environment without jeopardizing the primary prize. It would be a monumental step, but a cautious one. So what could finally trigger a decision to move beyond scouting and toward the central mound itself? The most likely catalyst is a technological leap so profound it changes the risk calculation overnight. Perhaps the development of a molecular-scale stabilization field that could freeze an artifact state upon exposure, or a form of three-dimensional imaging so precise it can read the ink on a rolled bamboo scroll without touching it. A national emergency could also force the issue, a major earthquake that destabilizes the structure, or the detection of catastrophic water infiltration, making rescue the only option to save the contents from total ruin. A slower cultural shift is another possibility, a generation that views the pursuit of this specific knowledge as a paramount human achievement, outweighing the traditional reverence for undisturbed rest. The countdown, therefore, is not to a date on a calendar, but to a moment when capability finally catches up to curiosity. Until that day, the mound will keep its silence, and we will keep our watch, forever on the verge of the greatest revelation in archaeological history. This quiet mound of earth holds a story 2,200 years in the making. It began with the obsessive mind of one man, Qin Shi Huang, a ruler whose thirst for immortality was matched only by his fear of death. That contradiction drove the creation of a subterranean empire, a ghost city guarded by a silent terracotta army, all pointing toward the final sealed chamber. We have followed the clues left by history and science, from the chilling account of the historian Sima Qian to the modern detection of mercury seeping through the soil. We have weighed the breathtaking possibilities, a library of lost knowledge, rivers of shimmering quicksilver, a body preserved in a jade cocoon, and the priceless symbols of a unified China. This is more than an archaeological site. It is a monument to the extremes of human ambition, a physical manifestation of our deepest fear and our most desperate hope, the desire to last forever. It stands as a testament to what we can build and a warning of what we might destroy in the process. The door remains closed, the mountain of earth intact, because the greatest mystery is not what lies within, but whether we should ever look. The decision balances our hunger for knowledge against our duty to preserve, our technology against our humility. So we leave you with this question, the same one that divides scientists, historians, and dreamers around the world. If you were in charge with all the power and all the responsibility, would you open it? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more journeys into history's greatest unsolved mysteries.